If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me. Taxi. Okay, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Good morning, I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Reverend, I heard Pope Leo say the other day that he's asking people to consider giving up for Lent, talking ill of the other person.
Oh.
That means there may not be talk radio for the next 40 days.
No,
but that's something.
Fast.
Yeah, that is something to consider, but I don't know how many people can fulfill that. But there is one individual who might qualify, and that is the 54th Comptroller of the state of New York, the Honorable Thomas P. DiNapoli. Good morning, Comptroller.
Good morning. It is great to be back with the Rev and the Rabbi.
By the way, I was
on the program.
Looking at the budget, we got to charge 6% for this interview, Comptroller. I just saw the numbers.
See the difference between the Rev and the Rabbi. I want to talk about your Catholic affiliation. He wants to talk about the budget. That is a distinct difference here. But I mean, you are a Catholic in your faith, and we're aware of that. And this is Lent season. For Muslims, it's Ramadan, but you engage in Lent, correct? It's part of the your Catholic practice.
I went to Mass for Ash Wednesday, and actually it coincided with the week of my late mother's birthday. So we always do a Mass for each of my parents for their birthday and the anniversary of their passing. So my mother's birthday was Valentine's Day, but we did the Mass on Ash Wednesday. I guess it was the 18th, right? If I'm remembering the numbers right. Got my ashes, so it was kind of a moment to reflect on what the next 40 days is about leading up to Easter, and obviously remembering my mom, who's been gone for many years, but in Catholic tradition, you usually do a funeral mass when a person passes. Some of those traditions are changing a bit, but we also always, as I said, do an anniversary mass of birthday and death day, and the church we do it at it's not the parish I live in now, but it's the parish where I was baptized. It's the parish where my parents grew up and had all their sacraments and marriage, and where the funerals were held. So when I'm in that church and remembering, in this case my mother, and being in the place where I was brought into the Catholic faith, where I was baptized, where my parents were baptized, it really reconnects me with what is my family's tradition and has been a very strong part of our identity. I mean, look, I think I'm sure I talked about it on the show before. My grandparents came over from Italy. They had next to nothing, but the one thing they had was their Catholic faith, and that got them through being immigrants, becoming Americans, the Depression, raising families here, all of that, and the faith was always intertwined with their sense of hope and optimism, and I don't think that's a unique story.
Yeah, and this is important. Rabbi and I had the opportunity to have a meeting this past week with one of our elected officials, and we talked about the role of religion within society, the role of faith within society. And that moral value consensus is so important. And I think that's one of the things that we're missing in our society, that we've kind of lost that North Star that we should have as a society. Rabbi?
Yeah, in Jewish tradition, and Tom, by the way, is very proficient, as you are, Reverend, in Jewish tradition. We have what's known as a Yahrtzeit, the anniversary of the death of a person. We light a candle. And one of the messages of a Yahrtzeit is to remind ourselves that a person may have left this world, but that legacy has been left behind by this person. There's an interesting statement that Jacob the patriarch never died. As long as his children are alive, so too is he alive. And I think that's one of the reasons we have memorial services. It's not just to take a moment, recite a prayer, but it's to look at responsibility. What can we do to perpetuate the memory of someone who has meant so much to us? So that's why having the Mass, having the Yahrtzeit, lighting the candles, saying the prayers, but above all, walking away and saying, what more can I do to keep that message alive? What can I do in my life? So it's not just a look back, it's a look forward at responsibility.
Here's where I'm going to challenge the rabbi on this, Tom, because we parallel the Catholic celebration of Lent. We're Protestant in our tradition, but we parallel that and celebrate it. But it's also a 40 days of fasting. And fasting is not always fasting from food. Sometimes it's fasting from bad attitudes or negative dispositions. What say you gentlemen about that?
Well, I wouldn't know much about, some of the attitudes. I mean, you can address that. No, but look, when we talk about, for example, a month before Rosh Hashanah, the new year, there are communities that indulged in these moratoria of not speaking ill of someone. For 30 days, we're not going to speak ill of someone. We're not going to gossip. So whenever there's a fast, it's not limited to food. That may be part of it, but that can't be all of it. And I think all of us saying, we're fasting from what? From behavior. Look at the prayers. It doesn't say, just talk about food, the blessing of food, but to talk about communal responsibility, individual responsibility. So I think fasting, those of us who are proficient in religion know it means a lot more than refraining from eating.
Yeah, well, Tom? Of course, when we were kids, right, you gave up candy, you gave up chocolate, bubble gum or whatever. As I became an adult, cake, whatever. I don't really do that anymore. But what I because people ask me still, what are you giving up for Lent? Right? It's always the Catholic. What are you giving up for Lent? And I've taken the view which kind of parallels what we're talking about is try even harder, to be a better person, whatever that definition is, whether that's speaking less ill, reaching out to folks you haven't talked to for a bit. I think that's more. I understand when we were kids why they, that issue of, self-denial and try to refocus made some sense. But as an adult, I think the bigger question is, how do we improve our own condition and the broader human condition? Right. And I do think, because then I remember, we come up to Easter weekend, and then I remember, do we have to wait till Easter Sunday morning, or is it noon on Saturday that we can start eating candy again? I mean, we're Catholics, we have all these rules. The rules change. We used to not eat meat on Fridays. Then it was only eating meat. During Lent. Which days?
Well, we Jews don't know about. We don't know about all those rules. Of
course not.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. When you give up something, it's got to be something that is of meaning to you. Like you can't say, I'm going to give up something that I'm going to give up meat when you don't eat meat anyway. Right. It's got to be something that pertains to your lifestyle.
Right. Well, you're right, but when you're a kid, right, so chocolate could be very important. And then, of course, again, Catholic guilt, right, maybe a little different than Jewish or Protestant guilt. And then, God forbid, you forgot for 1 minute and you ate that Hershey's candy bar. Am I going to go to hell because I forgot I gave up chocolate and I ate the candy bar, So some of that stuff, imprinted, some stuff maybe that was a little too burdensome, which, I worry, for some people, as they got older, did that get them to kind of marginalize the broader significance of what Lent is about? The broader significance of it leading up to Easter, which for a lot of folks talk about Christmas, especially non-Christians, like Christmas is the big holiday, and it's the gifts and it's commercialization, all that. From my perspective, and Rev, curious about yours, Easter is really the significant holiday because that's the resurrection. That's the whole message of, God's Son coming down and dying for all of us. That is the key Christian holiday. And I love the fact that you don't get hung up in gifts. I mean, yeah, we would get, Easter baskets and you hunt for eggs and that kind of thing. But that core message of the religion is the resurrection. Yeah. It's Easter Sunday.
And whether you believe in resurrection or not, it's about new beginnings. Mm-hmm. It's the first day of the week. That's why we celebrate it as our Sabbath, because it symbolizes new beginnings. Rabbi, you mentioned something, and I have to point to Hebrew scripture in the book of 2 Samuel, where David says, I will not offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God that costs me nothing.
Right.
Wow. How powerful is that?
It is.
If I'm going to give something in sacrifice,
it's got to be right.
It's got to cost me something. Right.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for fasting in general is we know that people enjoy eating, and when you fast, you're taking away that pleasure, but you're also demonstrating that you're sincerely committed to what you're saying. I'm willing to suffer. I'm willing to, deny myself food and make this declaration. But Tom, we're going to come back, so we're going to talk about the budget, obviously. But one of the things I find about you is because you're a person of faith, you often say to me, we're going to get through this. And I say to myself, a person of faith is a prisoner of hope. And no matter what the crisis is, we will get through it, because you sincerely believe that. You believe it on different levels, but one of those levels is your spiritual connection.
Oh, no question about it. And that's again the message of Easter, the season we're coming into. It is.
Hold on right there, gentlemen. Yeah. We'll be right back with more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Red Apple Radio Networks.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And we are speaking with the 54th Comptroller of the State of New York, the Honorable Thomas P. DiNapoli. Controller, I saw a sign recently in an office that said, optimists live longer. Studies have shown optimists live longer than pessimists. And it's very easy. Before we got on the air, we said, if all you do is read the front pages of certain papers, it's very easy to become pessimistic and say, what's the sense? But in all the years I've known you, and we go back quite a few years, you've always had that sense that whatever we're going through today, tomorrow is going to be better. Some people only see the thorns of life. You somehow recognize that thorns are attached to roses, so you can't have one without the other. But what is it that sustains you? Is it your faith? Is it your relationships with people? Probably all of those things. What is it that gives you that confidence that no matter what crisis, we're going to overcome it?
Well, I mean, it's all the above, and I think it's just, I felt this way when I was younger, and I feel this way as I've gotten older. We can make a difference, and that's why I've chosen public service as my calling, and to want to continue to be in public service, because I think even when times are tough and circumstances are difficult, we can make them better. Not individually, right, in concert with other people, but I do think my faith has been an important part of that. Again, we were talking about Easter, and as Reverend Bernard said, the message of hope and new beginning and so on that's associated with that. But I think as well of we believe there is a heaven. There's something even better to come along at some point. We believe. I love the saints. Saint Michael the Archangel is my grandmother, one of her most favorite saints. And at the Mass I was at on Ash Wednesday in this parish, they end the Mass with the prayer of Saint Michael. They don't do that at my parish, but it's a wonderful prayer because it has that message of Saint Michael being a force for good and going against Satan and the evil in the world. And I think that my faith teaches me that there is evil and bad things in the world, and we can't act like there isn't. But the counter to that, in a very real sense, with Catholics are like St. Michael the Archangel out there to fight Satan, but the notion that there are forces of good that are as great, really greater than evil. They got our back. They got our back. Yeah. And so when I do my prayer, I do a prayer in my heart, to St. Michael. I do a prayer. St. Teresa of Lisieux is one of my favorite saints. I think of now St. Pope John the 23rd, who was the Pope as I was, opening my eyes to the world as a young person. He was the Pope. and I had always had such a strong attachment to and as you know, Rabbi, his work as far as building bridges
Sure.
to the Jewish community.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where the change in the Catholic attitude towards relations with the Jewish community came out of it. It always frustrates me a bit that a lot of folks don't remember Pope John the 23rd, and these examples give me strength and a sense of hope.
So, Tom, Rev, are we saying that if you're truly religious, you don't have the luxury, if that is a luxury, of being a pessimist? You can't be a religious pessimist. Is that true?
Well, I like the fact that optimists live 11 to 15% longer than pessimists and have a 50 to 70% higher odds of reaching age 85 or older. I like those odds, and why wouldn't I want to live longer? I know individuals who, when you talk to them, it's burdensome because they only see life through the lens of despair. And here's the thing about faith. I was in Albany doing a panel discussion about faith and in the role of mental health, faith and mental health. And that's a new conversation because at one time, even if you were a person of faith, you wouldn't talk about mental health problems. There's such a stigma associated with it that you would never let anyone know if you were seeing a therapist because, you'd be ostracized, you'd be criticized for it. But the millennial generation has changed that. And one of the key things that I tried to stress to the audience there, we had a panel of experts, a psychiatrist and another faith leader and a community activist. And I said, faith reframes despair through the lens of hope. And that's what we do. Faith reframes despair through the lens of hope. Rabbi, I'll give you that for a sermon title.
I used it already.
Yeah. Give me credit. Give me credit. Yeah. But it's true. Yeah. It's true. How can we live without hope?
It's interesting when you read the Torah, for example, on the Sabbath. Every time you conclude a portion, it has to end on a positive note. You're not allowed to conclude with something that's negative. And you look at the last sentence of a particular reading, it's positive. And I think we have to look at that. Look, we've been through much. Look at our respective histories. Look at all our ancestors endured. And here we are. My father would often say when he would visit the graves of loved ones or talk about loved ones, Mizan and Dor, we're here. We are here. So in spite of it all, I think, or the word nevertheless is something you may remember, Tom, Rabbi Mauschwitz, Hillcrest Jewish Center, years ago in Queens. He spoke many times about the word nevertheless, how that is an integral part of all religious traditions. Yeah. Whatever they've done, nevertheless, we're going to overcome, we're going to do it. So,
but, the flip side, if I can, there are some people of faith who are pessimistic, and part of that pessimism is they get judgmental about people that don't share their same faith or the same point of view, and become antagonistic, or even like within my own faith, right? That person doesn't go to church every Sunday, or that person, or not giving up anything for I think some people, and then they get themselves in a dark place because they think everybody has to be up to what they believe in or what their standard is, and to me, and that's why I really appreciate what you do, Reverend Bernardo, what you do, Rabbi Potasnik. Religion, you should have that faith, but that faith should be an avenue for building bridges and understanding and appreciation. And there are still too many people in society that hold on to their own set of values, either within their own faith community or with other faith communities, and they get negative because they're not believing in what I believe in. They're not as good. This is why the world is going the way it's going, because not everybody is with my point of view. And we got to break down that. We got to break those kind of barriers and that small-mindedness down.
I got to tell you, somebody once said to me the difference between an optimist and a pessimist is the following. A pessimist will say, things cannot get worse. The optimist says, oh, yes, they can. So when you think of that, you say, wait a minute. That's not exactly the optimism we're talking about. All right, Rev, we're going to come back soon.
We got to take a break. Well, there'll be more of the Rev and the Rabbi right here on Red Apple Radio Network. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Reverend A.R. Bernard.
And we have extended the presence of our Comptroller, Thomas P. DiNapoli, 54th Comptroller of the state, because we want to talk about a host of things. Now we're going to talk about a budget, because that's on people's minds. Tom, let me ask you, I know in our personal lives, when we see increased expenditures, we have to look at the other side about increased savings. And I think what some people are concerned about is they hear about let's raise taxes, let's do all of these things, but they don't hear enough about, well, we're going to cut this. Let's look within. Do you find that to be so?
I feel like we're back to the question of optimism versus pessimism, right? And faith. Look, one of the challenges in government, obviously, is that budgeting tends to be, what did we spend last year and how much more do we spend, this year? There is not, as, years ago we talked about the concept of zero-based budgeting. Instead of using the current year as your base and seeing how much you have to add to it, just start, in a sense, from scratch. Start like you're at the very beginning and build your budget together. Unfortunately, the way, looking at, the state for the moment, and a lot of folks are talking about the city budget as well, that's not what happens. And one of the challenges for the state, certainly, and to the city as well, we will get through the budget negotiations and we will have a balanced budget for the coming year. It always happens. The problem is, and this is, during when we got all that federal money during COVID, it was a little different for a while, but now that federal money is spent down, you finish the current year budget that you're working on, and then you have these built-in out-year budget gaps. Last year's budget, $254 billion for the state, there were out-year budget gaps. We come up to this year. Revenues have been coming much higher than expected, largely because of Wall Street doing so well. And so the budget held together. In fact, as I said, more money coming in than anticipated. Governors proposed an even higher budget than last year, $260 billion. But even in that proposal, there are out-year budget gaps, cumulatively over the financial plan of over $27 billion. So even if you just take the governor's budget proposal, we'll get through the coming year, but we're going to start in the hole again for next year. So it really gets back to the work that I do as state controller. Mark Levine, who's a wonderful public servant, now the New York City controller. That's why we do the audit function that we do. We are always finding opportunities for cost savings, not to deny services to people, but to say there are smarter ways to spend money. Medicaid alone, that's one of the biggest growing expense items in the state budget. Very important healthcare services. I'm very concerned about the federal cuts that are coming down that are going to hurt people and hurt our finances. But we have found many opportunities to be smarter and more efficient in spending Medicaid money. And what else we found? I hate to say it, and I'm not saying this is typical. It's not. Got people ripping off the system. We've had a couple of cases just in the past few months of millions of dollars, basically fraud against the Medicaid system. So that vigilance to make sure that we're spending the money more appropriately, which I think gets to the point of your question, we do need to do a better job there.
Right. And you can't stay in office as long as you have in that position of controller unless you're doing the right thing. People trust you, and you get reelected again and again. But however, this year there's going to be a rare primary challenge. Is that correct?
Yeah. I haven't had a primary before. I think it's a sign of the times, right? There's a lot of a lot churning out there, but that's okay. Hey, look, I've always said I have a 4-year contract. It's up for renewal every 4 years. Obviously, at this stage of my life, I could be doing other things, but I am committed to public service with all the challenges that are out there, especially what's coming out of Washington that's hurtful to our state. I think someone with experience and a steady hand, especially in the position of looking out for the finances and the money, that's what you want. That's what you need. Right. So I have no problem looking for a contract renewal this year.
You have a record. I mean, it's not like you're a new face without a resume. You want people deserve a right. They have the right to run, but you look at your record, it's been outstanding, Tom. Over the years, people trust you. And that today in the political world, to say, I trust this individual, that's a major form of an endorsement.
Well, look, I've always said people forget, because it was so many years ago. I ended up in this position because my predecessor had to resign, and ultimately he went to prison. And I had to be selected by the legislature to fill the unexpired term. And I got to that position, despite the opposition of the governor at the time, because I had a bipartisan support. Republicans and Democrats, people who knew me after serving in the assembly, had confidence in me. And I've always said I don't want to let that initial confidence in me, don't want to ever let those folks down. And the reality is, some of the opponents are critical. Oh, he's been in so long. Well, governors have resigned in my time. Attorney General has resigned. Lieutenant governors have resigned. I haven't resigned because you may not like everything I do, but I run an honest shop. I've always had ethics and integrity as a priority. Don't penalize me because I haven't had to resign. And I'm not saying that I'm not setting a low bar on that score, but that's a reality. That's why I have been reelected and people have confidence. We're not screwing up. Again, you may not like every single thing we do, but I do it honestly, and I think that's what often is lacking in government.
And you will not take advantage of their inexperience. You're not going to even bring that up in the campaign, of course.
No, but, I'm not. They are trying my patience because, they're getting a little negative and, kind of smearing in ways that, I don't play. I don't play that kind of game. But,
you don't have to.
Well, but hopefully
your work speaks for you. Yeah,
it does. But I'm hoping in terms of the voters that they'll listen to the better angels, not the bad angels.
With affordability, the big word is for affordability right now. Yeah. And one of the guys running against you, he's an affordable housing nonprofit executive. And I mean, here you are as controller, right? How, if you can, do you respond to this issue of affordability, especially affordable housing? Because, New York City elected a new mayor who talked a lot about that. The governor has been very much in favor of that. We've worked together on it. What role does the Comptroller's office have in reference to something like that?
Well, I mean, various roles. I mean, we audit, many of the housing programs and how they're administered in the state. For instance, Mitchell-Lama housing, which I'm sure many of the listeners, especially in the city, but across the state as well, are part of that. We've just had a series of audits that have really pointed out how many of those Mitchell-Lama units are not being managed properly. And in fact, from a fiscal perspective, there are some real issues. From a health and safety perspective, we found some real issues in terms of mold and health conditions. We found apartments that have been kept vacant, not filled. Right? If we have this need for affordable housing, you got Mitchell-Lama, which is meant to be an affordable housing project initiative, rather, and yet you have warehoused apartments. So that's just, that's one example, in terms of an oversight role on housing projects. We also, with the pension fund, which again, the moral obligation of the pension fund is to make money for our retirees. That's the priority. But we have funded housing initiatives, including affordable housing. We've had a long-term relationship with the Community Preservation Corps that does that work across the state, and we are looking for new opportunities. Has to meet our return requirement, but one of the criticisms is, well, we're not doing anything promoting. Well, we are, but the pension fund is there to provide retirement security for our 1.2 million members. We are not the piggy bank to pay for what other levels of government that have more direct responsibility, in terms of housing grants and zoning changes and so on. That's not our job to make up for that. But are we a partner in terms of looking for more options to deal with creating more affordable housing or workforce housing, whatever label you want to put on it? Absolutely.
And the investment of pension funds is critical because you have to see what yields, what yields the most for people who depend on us, for the retirement benefits or whatever. But fiscal stability requires smart investment.
Right.
Smart investment, but also we take a conservative view. Our long-term investment goal is a 5.9% return over time. It's more conservative than most other pension funds. But we do that because we don't want to do the riskiest bets, right? So we have a diversified portfolio. A lot of it's in the stock market, but you don't want to be all in the stock market. A big chunk in fixed income, and then, of course, we're in alternatives like real estate and private equity and infrastructure. But over time, that has been a number we've been able to meet. But I will say this, our payouts to retirees are growing. The good news is we're all going to live to 95, right? But that means for a pension fund, you have to have more money put away because you're pre-funding the obligation, not just for the current retirees, but for the people going to retire 25, 30 years from now.
Yeah.
And as you know, there's a big push in Albany this year for reform of Tier 6, it's called, not to get too technical, but a big push for benefit enhancement, which will cost more money for the pension funds. Retirees want to see an increase in the cost of living adjustment. If those get approved by the legislature and the governor, going to require us to pay out even more money. So we can't use the pension fund as a piggy bank for pet projects. Yeah. We have to, at the end of the day, get back to our obligation to the frontline workers, whether they be police, teachers, nurses, firefighters, municipal workers, in the city or across the state, whether it's Mark Levine for the city or the Teachers Retirement Fund or the fund that I'm the trustee for, we have to look out for the long-term strength of the fund. That's got to be our priority.
And Tom,
I'm glad you clarified that, because you could be accused of sitting on money that you could be doing other things with, and you have to be very careful how you manage, how you steward those things. Did you hear that, Rabbi, by the way? You heard it here on the Reverend Rabbi Show, a Democrat taking a conservative view. So we are balanced here.
It's interesting. Tom, over the years, has transcended the party labels. I mean, I know he's a member of the Democratic Party, but he's a welcome figure in different circles because he talks about issues that really resonate with people on different sides of the political aisle. And Tom, you've been a great supporter of the state of Israel over the years, and our community is most grateful to you for all that you've done.
Well, that's not going to change at all. And it's funny because one of my opponents is criticizing that I have some Republicans that have donated to my campaign. Well, that's because the Comptroller job is the least partisan of all the jobs. And as I mentioned on the show, I grew up in a good Republican family, so I've always. I don't think one side is better than the other. There's good and bad on all sides, and you want to have everybody together.
Before we let you go,
common sense.
Before we let you go, Tom, I put in a claim for Reverend Bernard's unclaimed funds. So
but you won't get any of it. It all goes to him.
He promised to let me know when he gets the check. So I'm trusting my brother here.
You can't leave, Tom. But I know you are really very emphatic about this. Unclaimed funds. How much money are you holding so far?
Well, I mean, these are all bank accounts and uncashed checks, so the money keeps coming in. We're trying to return as much as possible. So we're actually returning now about $2 million a day, and I'm glad you're raising this, because number one, I want your listeners to go to our website, just put in New York State Comptroller, click on unclaimed funds. But we have a new program we started in 2025 where if we have what we consider to be valid information on who you are for new accounts coming in $250 or less, instead of us sending you a letter saying contact us, we will send you the check. Get the check in the mail. So some people have been concerned, is it a scam? Is it real? If you get one of those checks, and we'll have a letter as well explaining it, it's real. Cash it, but we're hoping to expand what we're doing on that initiative. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to get this money. No reason for us to hold on to it. These accounts never expire. Some of them go back to the 1940s. So search your name, your church or synagogue, your mosque. It could be an organization, could be a deceased parent or grandparent. We might need a little more information to have you get that claim. I'll just remind your listeners as well, they have a question. Our 800 number is 1-800-221-9311, staffed during regular business hours. So hopefully some of your listeners will get some unclaimed funds.
All right. Tom is P. DiNapoli. Yep.
Tom DiNapoli, right here on the Reverend Rabbi. Thank you so much for being on the program always. And we'll be back with more of the Rev and the Rabbi.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best of what our country has to offer, especially health care. Across every state, every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families healthy. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.